Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're doing a sick video. I think you're going to like it. It's going to be how to get quicker on your trails and also how to maintain speed on your trails. So let's get into it. Right, so since I'm next to these sick berms right here, this is where I think I should start. And one tip that's really important to me and that I think should be important to you guys as well is your braking when you go into a berm, approaching it through the berm and coming out of it. Braking's quite a tricky thing to get right in a berm. Basically what some people do is they approach the berm really quick, you know, maybe you've gone through a super fast section before. Just as you enter the berm they sort of slam on the brakes, maybe even skid a little bit, and then they go around it, and that isn't what you should do because that basically like knocks the flow of the trail. The point of a berm is to gain more speed when you're coming out of it. What you want to do is manage your speed before the berm. You're going to want to make sure that you're not going too quick for the berm itself. Obviously you can get quicker and quicker at berms the more you practice with them. Obviously do that in slow steps. Basically don't just put as many pedals in as you can and then brake right at the start, because you're going to lose all your momentum and then basically the berm isn't going to work how it's meant to. The second part of berm braking is braking inside of the berm. This is something that I used to do a lot and that I still sometimes do, and it's not something that you should do because once again that's not how a berm works. It's really intertwined with my last point. You want to set your speed before the berm. There's two things that can go wrong. One, if you brake in the middle of the berm and you lock up your back brake, you will skid, and because of the turn of the berm, sometimes you might have seen it in edits, you know, and people fire out the back. But if you're not so experienced and you end up doing that by accident, you can actually cause like quite a death crash for yourself, especially if you're going fast. Ones like this are kind of fine to get out of because, you know, they're quite flat. You might not necessarily be going really quickly, so make sure that when you go into the berm you keep your speed constant until the middle, which is when you pump, and you should come out with a little bit more speed. Braking after the berm can be okay depending on what's coming up next. If you're on like a proper downhill trail, sometimes you have berms into rooty sections, and then obviously that would be a perfectly acceptable time to brake a little bit because maybe the speed coming out of the berm was a lot, but you're obviously not going to want to go like full speed into roots. Maybe you're not too experienced. But with the setup that we have here, you can't see it because of the position of the camera. There's a berm here and then there's a berm here. You want to pump out of that, like I said, and then pump into this one to get your speed. The reason that people do all this braking and stuff is that they think you have to sort of go as quick as you can throughout the whole thing, and they don't really see the features as help. They sort of see it as like a hindrance, but actually berms really are like probably one of the better features of a trail because it does give you speed. If you've lost speed and then you get into a berm section, it should be the dream for you really. Just look out for the braking in the middle. That's probably one of the more important ones. Right then, now that all that's done, we're going to move on to some tips for hitting the dirt jumps in your trail. So let's get into it. Right, so next to me here is a gap jump that you've probably seen in some of my other videos, and the next sort of section I'm going to be talking about is jumps, not necessarily gap jumps in particular. Wanted to use this jump because, you know, I like it quite a lot. It's quite a nice jump. So basically there's some ways to jump a jump, and depending on sort of what your goal for the jump is, depends on how you should hit it. Since we're talking about how to get faster on the trail, I'll focus on that. Some of you might know the term racer or racing the jump, and basically that comes from literally racing. You know, you want to get over the jump as quick as you can is basically what the term means. And the way you do that is by sort of, so when you jump a jump normally or you boost it, you give a lot of pump into the jump. When you want to racer a jump, you kind of want to almost anti-pump, and that kind of means pumping at the wrong time almost. You want to make sure that you don't pop up, you want to pop forwards. You kind of want to, rather than going down and up like this, you kind of want to go like that, if that makes sense. It's quite hard to like genuinely explain, but hopefully in the clips that I'm rolling now you'll be able to understand the difference. It's quite obvious to see the difference when you see a clip of it, but it is actually quite hard sometimes to understand how you really do that. It can be quite a dangerous one by me saying that you have to pump at the wrong time, because like if you were to pump too late you might already be off, and then you go like this and then you just go over the bars and die. You almost don't want to pump at all, kind of thing. You just sort of want to make sure your speed's enough to clear it, but you just want to push through rather than push up. And if you've jumped quite a bit you'll understand, you'll probably know how to do this already. I'm doing my best to try and describe it to people that haven't ridden before. I don't have slow-mo on my camera though, which is annoying, so you can't really fully see, but I'm trying to get a few different angles so you understand it. But yeah, that's it for jumps really. If you want to be stylish, obviously you want to give it a big boost and huge whips, but that's a different video for a different day. That's just about it for jumping. Just make sure that your speed is correct and enough to clear it perfectly, and not over clear or under clear, because they both obviously lose speed out, and I don't really need to explain why, it's pretty self-explanatory. So yeah, let's move on to a new bit. Right, method 3 of how to get faster on the trails is pumping on the rollery sections that you find in your trails. And whoa, have I just changed t-shirts? Crazy. So behind me here are 2 sort of rollers, and it also doubles into a gap as well. And I've actually got Brendan with me over here today, and he's gonna help with demonstrating how you pump these rollery things nicely. So we're gonna switch up the angle and then get into teaching. Right, so the first step that you might want to do if you're a little bit less experienced, because it is easier in my opinion, is to basically do the 2 rollers as a gap rather than pumping them like the rollers that they are. You literally just do it exactly the same as I was saying. You want to try and race it as best you can. You want to stay low to the ground, do the sort of anti-pump technique that I told you, and that will keep you close to the ground and landing in perfectly. It can take a bit of practice to get used to like how far you're going to jump, especially if there's a few more in a row. So just get practicing on things like this, try and race them if you can, stick low, and yeah, that should be epic. Right, so Brendan's just going to quickly jump this as a gap. He's going to racer it as well so you can see what I mean, and whilst he's pedaling in and as he hits it, I'm going to try and do my best to sort of commentate over it whilst he gets to each stage. So he's pedaling in with quite a lot of speed. As you can see, he's getting his speed up, gets the jump and races it very nicely, sticking quite low to the ground, landing perfectly in the transition at the end and getting away with a lot of speed. I'm going to race the jump as well and prove to you that it can be done on any bike. So I'm pedaling in, lot of speed, get to the takeoff, anti-pump and carry on. Right, so when you get a little bit more used to these sort of things and rollers and stuff like that and pump bumps, pumping them like a roller will probably actually give you a little bit more speed than if you're racing the jump, depending on kind of how you do it or which one you're better at. What you want to do is when you get to the takeoff, rather than jumping to like jump it, you sort of push into it, if that makes sense, and you sort of stick to the actual ground the whole time, and when you're in this middle bit you give a big pump as if you're going to take off of this bit as well, except you don't take off. It's kind of actually really hard to explain it, isn't it? Yeah, you just sort of have to get down there and doing it. Brendan's going to get back up to the top now and do it in a sec. As you'll see, you can do it like a manual, and this can prove to be easier because when you're just on one wheel it's quite a lot easier to like push your weight into the transitions, if that makes sense, because you don't need to worry about going front wheel, back wheel, front wheel, back wheel. It's literally just back wheel the whole way. If you just watch this, you'll see what I mean. I'll move out the way for you all. So as you see, he used just his back wheel like a manual. He comes up the lip and then straight away as he reaches the peak of the takeoff or the top of the roller, he pushes his weight right back down and stays literally in the whole time. And then as you see on the way out, he sort of comes out of the manual, front wheel down and rolls away. And as you might be able to see and compare to the jumping, it's quite a similar speed that he's getting out of it. Yeah, it's really just sort of dependent on what you're more comfortable with. Obviously, if there's just one lump in the middle of the track that isn't made to be jumped, you'll learn this more if you ride a lot more. You'll start to see the difference between things like what a table is and what a roller is. It does become very obvious very soon. So that has been 3 ways to get quicker on the trails. If you guys like this video in particular, I'll make a second one, maybe somewhere else, and with some other content in it. So yeah, that's it really. Hope you guys enjoyed it. See you in the next one.
I just wanna have some fun.